Speaking of shows, I've been watching Picard and I've been, for the most part, pretty disappointed with that show so far. Don't know how anyone else feels. I realised I kind of had this like no expectations idea in my mind, but once I got into that show, I kind of realised I wanted it to be dry. I wanted it to be like the Next Generation, be like really dialogue driven, and it's not. It's just like a generic show. It feels all kind of there's a lot of like setup going on where they're just forcing the ideas down, like they're explaining everything to you and creating little scenes that explain this bit and that bit, and it just feels like one of these kind of sort of dull Netflix shows that are all sci-fi, but then you watch it and it's all just exposition. So I haven't really been enjoying that. I don't know if we've got any Picard fans out there, but it ain't doing it for me. And yeah, I'm gonna keep watching it, but it just doesn't have what I'm looking for. Also, the soundtrack. Now, by the way, when I like criticize, take it with a grain of salt. There's a load of people that put a lot of hard work into this, and I'm sure there's loads of people that out there that really enjoy the show. Everyone's got different taste. But one of the things I hate to criticize is music. But I do not like the soundtrack to the show. It feels very invasive, like it's trying to steer the emotions of each moment. And with like it having such a kind of exposé, I don't know how you say it, but so much exposition in explaining the plot and the characters and their motives so far that the music just feels like this extra layer of force, like it's trying really hard to convey how you should feel about each scene. And because I don't respond to that kind of exposition style of setup, I'm just not digging it at all. Talismancer says, I've been enjoying Picard. It's a nice twist on the old franchise. Well, I would say, like, how is it a twist when, like, the story hasn't even got going yet? Like, I mean, he's only just, spoiler alert, about to get into a starship again, right? So, from this point, it may be like more like the old series, but so far it's been nothing like the Next Generation. It feels really, to me, it feels very disconnected from that show. Feels like they've taken the character to create a new storyline, but the way the story's being told and what it is just not in the style of the Next Generation. It doesn't have to be, but I'm not just enjoying what it is, I guess. It's Patrick Stewart. I have expectations. I expect the same level of excitement as TNG, says Paneris. It's not like the Next Generation at all, unfortunately. It's not in my mind. It's not. 3 episodes to get on a ship, says Paneris. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it could have. Well, this is it. Like, they've got a story and they've got a setup, and hey, maybe the payoff at the end is good, right? We don't know that yet. But it could have just started with him on a ship. I guess it doesn't make sense if the story is that he's retired and he's getting back in, but the way they've set up the motive, I don't like it as well. Like how it just feels very kind of forced. Like you introduce this character who comes into his life, and then she dies, and all of a sudden he's like madly motivated, and it just feels all a bit like, I don't know, just very like you should think this because of this, and this is his reason for doing that, and all a bit forced at the moment. The Next Generation, I can't remember how they set the show up, but I seem to remember the experience being that you learn about the characters steadily through the season by watching how they did stuff, right? Like you learned about them. They're the kind of things I like to watch the most, when you learn about characters based on their like on-screen behavior, rather than like Worf, for example. I don't recall there being a whole bunch of like Worf is this, Worf is that, and little bits of dialogue to explain his character. You learn about it slowly over time, and there's definitely episodes that focus on enriching his backstory and explaining, like, if I remember correctly, was he an orphan raised by humans? Cool. It feels almost blasphemy to think I could be getting this entirely wrong. It's been ages since I watched the show, and I watched that show like a couple times through as well. Really loved it. But yeah, you always just learned about them through the things they were doing. And there were definitely moments of, I guess you could call it exposition, but everything so far in Picard is just it's this constant setup. It's a twist because it's a new series with new plots, new pacing, and continuing the stories of the universe. It's not a follow-on from TNG for me, and I'm not convinced it's supposed to be. Well, on that note, I'll definitely agree with you then. 100% on that. Talismancer, if I said it was your message or not. I would agree with you on that front. But I'm just not that into it so far, and I'm sticking with it because it's Picard and the Next Generation. I really, really want it to shine, but it kind of feels like if it continues on the track it's on so far, I'm not feeling it. I also really dislike all of the Romulan stuff happening with the Borg cube. It just feels all a little too... I don't know how to quite describe it, but everything you're seeing happening there is like set up. It's all like trying to use the events that are happening to set up the story. And it's not very clear is the problem I'm having with it. Like, I don't really kind of fully understand what exactly they're doing. And they kind of explain it through like complicated technical terms, and it's that like storyline or that arc or whatever you want to call it is kind of not doing it for me either. So yeah, it's just a lot of things that I didn't quite get along with so far. Think about how we learned about Tasha Yar's background. We got to spend 20 minutes of our episode discussing the way she grew up through her sister, then only got to see a tiny amount of it. Yeah, that's right. That's definitely right. I don't recall being bored by that. Like, this is the weird thing about art and human experience and storytelling and creativity. It always makes me wonder, like, what if I'd have seen this 10 years ago? Then would have been different, or did somehow my mood affect what I thought of this? Maybe I didn't watch it in the best of moods, and I might have enjoyed it more if I had seen it in a different mood. I always wonder about factors like that, So you definitely put on rosy tinted glasses. Talismancer says, all Riker discussing the capabilities of Data in the first episode. Yeah, there's probably some of that. See, I didn't start watching that show okay, now I'm going to watch this show and, episode 1. I'd already seen a fair amount of it on telly. It used to just be on Sky every single day after school, and I never liked it. I always used to just flick past it. But every now and then you'd watch a bit of it and you sort of understand who some of the characters are. That one's the robot, that kind of thing. Then my mate one day convinced me that the show was really good and worth watching, and so I started and just sort of jumped right in onto some episodes. Didn't start from the beginning. And then after I realised that I loved it, I went and brought the box sets. So I guess maybe that made me look at it a bit differently, because you kind of knew you already liked these characters that were being explained. That horrible holodeck scene where Data is trying to whistle at the very beginning. Picard is managing better exposition than that. Alright, I might go back and literally rewatch it just to see how it feels and what the similarities are. Yeah, all fair points, Talismancer. I'm kind of not surprised. Like I said, rosy tinted glasses and all that, right? Remember that Picard has to introduce these exciting characters to a completely new audience. Sorry, existing characters to a completely new audience. Yes, yeah, I guess so. It's a balancing act, right? Talismancer says X. I'm hoping it's coming across, but I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm debating with you. Yeah, I get it. They're all fair points. I mean, it sounds like you've had a positive interpretation of it all, or a good experience with it, whereas I haven't. And I'm kind of interested in why, the whys and the why nots of that. Because there are, as you point out, some similarities. With these new characters, though, maybe it's the acting, maybe it's the way they're written. Of the new characters, no one's really jumping out off the page. Maybe the holographic Doctor, although the change of accent and tone was what's that about? So there's a bit of mystery there that might become more interesting. The new Commander was a bit of a badass, which I didn't really like. I don't know. Maybe I'll have to wait a bit more, but not many of the new characters are that interesting. I'll probably say the Romulan woman that he lives with, and I believe they're married, the two, or whatever the Romulan equivalent of their partnership is, right? Like they're probably the most likable so far. Sledge-O-Matic says, back in the day, I'd watch it on a black and white TV. The top part of the screen would stretch the image, so Picard's head always looked like he had a pointy head. He does have a bit of like an elongated head at the back. I was noticing that, like watching the show. Probably noticed it back on The Next Generation as well. What I always enjoy about sci-fi is when it takes a concept of society/humanity and tries to test it in a new way. The Next Generation was fantastic with that, says Yeti. Yeah, that's what I've always loved about The Next Generation and like where it occurs in sci-fi. I've never been a big fan of I've never been too much of a fan of sci-fi stuff that lacks some of that. It's hard to say really, like what's what, because there's so much of it, and I'm trying to just remember a bit of it and don't even know where to start. Like The X-Files was a show I was very fond of. But that wasn't really trying to say too much ever about humanity, but its tone was fantastic. Like, it always just got this really nice sort of unique creepiness to it. Like, I know X-Files might seem like one of the most kind of iconically, maybe you'd even think of it as being kitsch or something like that, with its theme song and it's all about aliens and stuff, but I never felt it was like its tone always had this like real kind of intrigue to it. I don't think Picard's supposed to be like The Next Generation. Best not to get into it with those expectations. There's definitely fan service for existing fans though. Yeah, I didn't really like much of the fan service. I thought although the way it opened up with Data was kind of interesting, I thought we might see more of him. Yeah, I mean, I thought I was pretty cool with not having expectations, but I realised when watching it I kind of expected it to be drier, to be more like the Next Generation was, I guess. X-Files was genuinely creepy at times. The characters were also so well-rounded, says Kiki Duds. Yeah, they were. And the way that they set up like some of the sci-fi, let's say, events or... Wow, these doors look fantastic, don't they? Or happenings. They so often kind of hit this this unique angle on everything. Like, I love this one episode where there's aliens abducting. Like, it's one of these episodes where they go from being really subtle and you don't really see too much to like throwing stuff in your face. And what you learn is that the aliens that you saw are actually actors. They were like government agents or whatever, right? And it was just such a crazy concept that they like set up this whole narrative of like the aliens that you just saw were just the government, right? Doing government things. And creating the presence of aliens to do their own testing and stuff, and it was just so brilliant at being not quite what you expected. Talismancer says, X, you're showing your age. I know, right? The golden days of television back then, X, says Krausphere. Yeah, they were probably it, like late 90s, well, nah, probably like noughties was like peak television, right? And then slowly the internet's been chipping away at it.